My name is Olivia Heim, and today we'll be discussing early Asian theater. To start us off, we will be talking about the background, Chinese, Indian, and Japanese history. This will provide some context going forward. We will also be talking about the origins of Asian theater, which started in India in the 8th century BCE. Another thing we'll be talking about is the differences in Asian theater, notably from India, China, Japan, and Bali. Bali is a conglomerate of multiple different nations, and each with their own individual and unique history, which is why I did not add it to our background. But we will be discussing their contributions to theater. Another thing we'll be discussing is 3 notable playwrights, one from India, one from China, and one from Japan. Just so you know, there may be some subjects that we'll be talking about that can be considered triggering. I have provided content warnings, and I will be notifying you well in advance as we are discussing them. All right, to start us off, Chinese history. The earliest dynasties were the Jia, the Shang, and the Zhou. The Jia dynasty was organized through a village network. The hereditary monarchy was very prominent, and it focused its resources on flood control, as the Yellow River would flood often. This was known as China's sorrow. The Shang dynasty saw the emergence of political organization, which came about as fortified cities all loyal to the center. Horse-drawn chariots were also brought forth in this time, and the Chinese army increased. The Zhou dynasty brought about the idea of the mandate of heaven. This essentially means that the emperor has a divine right to rule over China. Also during this time, many forms of literature were written about Confucianism and Chinese culture. These were subsequently destroyed by the Qin dynasty. Around this time, we also saw the rise of a distinct social order. The social order started with the ruling class at the top, the artisans and craftsmen, the merchant class, the semi-servile peasants, which were a fairly large class, and at the very bottom was the slave class. They also saw an emergence of a religion focused on ancestral veneration and familial respect, and it was also very prominent in the connection of the spiritual world through ritual sacrifices. One of these rituals was the oracle bones, which were used for communicating to the spirit world and determining the future. An animal bone or a turtle shell would have a question written on it and then would be heated over a flame. The way the bone or shell cracked would determine the answer to your question. Speaking of questions, discussion question time. Is there a modern day ritual or item that reminds you of oracle bones? Now that I've let that question settle in a little bit, China is very well known for its patriarchal society during this time. Oftentimes the father would make household decisions and lead rituals with the family. Next we'll be talking about Indian history. Something to note, India's history is complex and comprised of a multitude of different cultures, so it is difficult to put down one unified history. But most sources agree, India's history typically begins with the Indus River Valley civilization. The Indus Valley civilization was the first known civilization in India's history, but is the least known of the ancient civilizations. From what has been discovered, there were signs of social stratification, but no signs of a royal building. Potentially a matriarchal society that worshipped goddesses of fertility. And the civilization one day just disappeared. No one really knows what happens to it, but there are a few theories. The 2 that really stuck out to me were the possibility of disease wiping out the population or flooding, as there were remains found near rivers. Next is typically the Aryan migration. The Aryan people migrated to the region and settled in the Indus Valley, what was known as the Indus Valley, and the Ganges Plain. They created the Vedas, which was the predecessor to Hinduism. Also from the Vedas, we got the caste system. The caste system started with the Brahmins, or the priests, which were at the top, the Kshatriyas, which were the warrior and ruling class, the Vaishyas, which were the tradesmen, merchants, and artisans, and at the bottom were the Shudras, who were manual laborers. Typically below them would be the slave class, but that wasn't typically mentioned in the structure. All right, discussion question time. What is an example of a piece of theater that makes use of a caste system? One last thing to note was dharma. Dharma was the duty of an individual in life to fulfill their purpose in society, and this really justified the use of the class system because it was considered like your duty, your holy duty. and this is a crash course on Indian history. I am presuming that this PowerPoint will be posted, so you will be able to watch it on your own time. There we go. All right, next we'll be talking about Japanese history. One very notable thing about Japanese history is the Shinto religion. Shinto comes from two Chinese words, Shen and Dao, which means the way of the spirits. The goal is to live in harmony with the kami. The kami are something that inspires awe, respect, and devotion. Kami can really be anything that inspires awe, respect, and devotion. In some, it's the sacred quality of human existence or nature, because it can be ancestors or something as simple as a mountain. Another interesting thing to note was that Chinese culture was very prevalent through cultural adoption, because China never invaded Japan, but there was a cultural exchange which the Japanese adopted Chinese ways but modified them to better fit their culture and religion. There was also the ruling class, which was the institution of the shogun. The shogun was the military leader of the nation and was given power by the emperor. The Tokugawa regime was known for this type of ruler, which was put into place after many years of civil war. Despite the Tokugawa regime enforcing very, very strict rules, it was best known for implementing many years of peace before being overthrown by the Meiji Rebellion of Samurai. Another notable thing about the Tokugawa regime was the floating world, which were sectors of Japan that were known for their art, whimsy, humor, and openness about sex. All right, discussion question time. Are there any places in the modern day that are like the floating world? If so, name one. Lastly, we'll be talking about Indian theater. This was a photo I found of a Indian theater production. I thought it was really cool, and I love the use of colors and notable distinctions from their culture. It was very cool. All right, it's considered the oldest form of theater in Asia, starting in the 8th century BCE. Hindu mythology speaks on the origins of theater in India, specifically in the Hindu holy books. It talks about how before the creation of the world, the gods fought demons, and the god Brahma asked the gods to reenact the battle for their entertainment. In the production, the demons were defeated by a flagstaff. To protect the future of theater from the demons, the pavilion was built, and the flagstaff now indicates the location of performances even to this day. Speaking of Brahma, Brahma also ordered that dance and drama be combined. The words dance and drama are the same in Indian dialects. In the beginning, dance dominated the theater space. Another interesting thing to note about the origins of Indian theater was the emergence of sastra. Sastra is the staging conventions of the dance. It lists costumes, makeup, gestures, and body positions. It also lists any plots that are considered unsuitable for production. It's kind of a how-to and what not to do, which I think is very interesting. All right. And to get more into the differences between different aspects of Asian theater, we will again start with our beginner, India. It implants lots of dance and drama. As I stated before, dance took precedence over drama in early productions. There's not much scenery, but there's usually a few properties, notably a 3-foot high brass lamp and a curtain. The curtain is sometimes held between the stage and the large lamp by 2 stagehands. So the 2 stagehands would be holding it, the lamp would be behind it, and then the audience would be in front. All right. Speaking of curtains, peering over the curtain was a notable dance move. A character would fan the lamp with the curtain until the flame was very, very high. The dancer would keep his face hidden while showing his arms and legs at the edge of the curtain. At the climax of the dance, the dancer pulls the curtain away to reveal his makeup and costume and how he dances, and then the curtain is removed from the stage until the next dance to allow that dancer his moment of glory, essentially. Another very notable thing is as drama was implemented into Indian theater, the storyteller and narrator became the most important character in their productions. This narrator was also known as the Sutradhara, which literally means the string holder. The Sutradhara would set up the scene and interpret the moods of the characters as the play was going on. Discussion question time. What's an example of a production that uses a Sutradhara-like character? Another very interesting thing to note about the Sutradhara is that they would also be known as a translator. This storyteller would translate certain statements by the actors that are not found in the common folks vernacular, which made theater more universal, so it wasn't just the upper class who were able to understand it. And our notable playwright, his name is Vasa. He was born in the 3rd century AD in India. He was the earliest known Sanskrit dramatist. 13 of his plays were discovered and published in 1921 by an unnamed Indian scholar. He is best known for the Dream of Vasavadatta. This was a play about a king who loses, then regains his kingdom from a usurper who tries to convince the king's wife that the king had died tragically in a fire. Themes of heroism and romantic love are very prevalent in his plays. These were pulled from 2 of India's greatest epics, the Ramayana and the Mahabharata. And another thing to note about Vasa, sort of a trigger warning, he was not shy about adding violence and showing violence on stage in his productions. All right. Next, we will be discussing Chinese theater. This is a print of a production in China, and I thought it was very unique with the silhouettes and yeah. Alrighty. China is very distinct from other Asian forms of theater because there's virtually no dance in Chinese theater. And classical theater in China is known as opera due to the use of arias and recitatives in the dialogue. Chinese theater would typically start in the evening and ended after midnight. It would typically go on for so long because the performance would consist of several plays and scenes from best-known dramas. Interesting thing to note, due to the fact that the plays would last so long, audience behaviors are rather different because the theater would cut into people's meal times, so audience members would eat, drink, and talk during performances. They would only stop talking during intense or dramatic parts of a scene. Chinese theater is known for no scenery beyond a painted backdrop, but this allowed costumes and makeup to shine. Tables and chairs were used with a multitude of purposes throughout the production, and certain elements like wind or nature would be painted on boards and shown to the audiences. Tables and chairs were typically used. For example, this chair could be a throne, or it could be a tower if I were to like stand on it like this. So I could be, to use a more Western example, the fair maiden stuck in the tower, but using minimal properties and allowing the audience to use their imagination. I apologize for all the movement and noise. But as I said, this limited use of properties really allowed the audience to use their imagination and immerse themselves in their own way. Discussion question time. What are the benefits of using limited properties in a production like China? Okay, now for our notable playwright, Tang Jianzhu. He was born in China in 1550, and he worked as an official under the emperor during the Ming Dynasty. He was best known for his play, The Peony Pavilion. The Peony Pavilion was also known as a ghost story. It's a love story of a young woman from a wealthy family. Her name is Du Linyang, and a scholar, Lui Mingmei. Seeing Liu in a dream, Du fell in love with him and then died of sorrow. She then goes to the underworld, and the judge of the underworld promises to resurrect her so that she may be with Liu, because as a spirit, she was constantly searching for Liu. Du's spirit appears in Liu's dream. He then falls in love with her, and when he wakes up, he exhumes her body, and the two live happily for the rest of their lives. The Peony Pavilion is one of the 4 dreams, which is in Chinese, Lin Chuang Xi Meng, as it is part of a collection of 4 other well-known plays of Tang's in which dreams are a very important part of the story. All right, another discussion question for you. What are some popular forms of media that use dreams as a critical device of the story? Alrighty, now we will be talking about Japan and their theater. This is a woodblock print of a Japanese theater production. I love the use of colors and I just think it's so pretty. All right. One notable thing about Japan is that they have retained their traditions of their early theater. Their elements of stagecraft and their costumes remained virtually unaltered. This is probably due to the fact that for a very long time they were an isolated nation. Another very interesting thing to note is that staging developed very much so earlier than in the West. By Shakespearean times in the West, the Japanese had already developed the revolving stage, trapdoors, and complex lighting effects. Japan was best known for No and Kabuki theater. No theater was developed in the 14th century and was modeled after Dengaku, which was a rice planting and harvesting ritual, and Sarugaku, which was popular entertainment that involved juggling, miming, and music. No theater was also known for its usage of masks, which have come to be westernized and known as kabuki masks. And the masks were delegated to the principal dancer and his companions. Kabuki theater was originally composed of predominantly women and was developed in the early 17th century. Kabuki scenery was elaborate and complex, which allowed the story to come to life. The costumes were reminiscent of the Edo period, which made the characters more recognizable at a glance. Due to the fact also that a lot of the traditions of early theater were unaltered, this allows for a lot of distinction with characters, so you can look at a particular character and be like, oh, I know exactly who that is, just by looking at them. All right, discussion question. Is it important for people to learn that Kabuki theater was composed predominantly of women when it first started? Why or why not? Our notable playwright is Chikamatsu Monzemon. He was born in Ichizen, Japan in 1653. He is credited for writing more than 100 plays, most of these being Joruri dramas. Joruri dramas are plays that are solely use puppets. Chikamatsu wrote Joruri dramas that allow the puppet masters to show off their skills, and his works had considerable literary merit. He also wrote kabuki plays, but is best known for Joruri. There are two main categories of plays: Jidaimono and Suwamono. Jidaimono is a historical romance, and Suwamono is domestic tragedies. Most audiences preferred Suwamono because they were deemed more realistic and more like European theater. The characters in Chikamatsu's domestic tragedies are merchants, servants, housewives, criminals, and prostitutes, and others that populated Osaka, where Chikamatsu lived. Content trigger warning for some of the things that he put in his plays, notably one in particular. Many of his tragedies were based on true events, such as the double suicide of lovers. Content warning over. Next, we will be talking about Bali, which is kind of our bonus because we didn't really have any notable history, because this theater is representative of smaller nations in Asia, such as Thailand, Kampuchea, Laos, Malaysia, the Philippines, and Vietnam. These nations use Balinese dancing, which can be performed anywhere, but is often performed before a temple or pavilion that is used for community meetings, because it was a very communal sort of performance, which used the gamelan, which were the musicians known for accompanying them. Since the dancers usually performed outside, there are no traditional properties or visual indications of scene changes. The movements and dialogue suggested that the location of the scene and scenic devices were used before each dance to indicate a new scene was taking place. All right, last discussion question. What is one difficulty that comes with solely relying on the actors to indicate location and scene changes? And here is some popular entertainment of Asia as well as theater. There was origami, board games, card games, flying kites, fishing, wrestling, particularly sumo, and swimming. They were very active, and sports took a lot of prominence, along with the arts. And to summarize, each portion of Asia has their own distinct methods of theater that play into and draw from elements of their individual culture and history. There are some similarities, though for the most part, they stand alone. Thank you for watching, and good luck on the quiz.